Every week, Hillsdale College President Larry Arnn joins Hugh Hewitt to discuss great books, great men, and great ideas. This is Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio.
Morning glory and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That music means the first Hillsdale Dialogue of 2026 is underway. Every week at this hour, I'm joined by the president of Hillsdale College, Dr. Larry Arnn, or one of his colleagues, to talk about either important events that are breaking news in front of us or old and important books of the past. We are presently in a series, if you're new to the studio and the station, a series on this book, Winston Churchill's The Gathering Storm, Volume 1 of his war memoirs, which we will return to next week, Part 16. But as it is the first show of the new year, I want to welcome Dr. Arnn and begin by saying, Happy New Year. I hope everything is good at Hillsdale College, Dr. Arnn.
Kids are coming back next week, and probably we're going to survive that.
You've been through that this will be the 26th return since you joined Hillsdale in 2000, I believe. Larry, I want to let you know that there are two new affiliates of particular interest, I think, to you at the beginning of the year. One of them is in Michigan, WMKT, up in Charlevoix or Petoskey, Michigan. Triple Talk 102.3, 103.3, and 102.3, 1270 AM. And then the home of naval aviation, Pensacola, Florida, News Radio Pensacola, 92.3 WNRP. So both in your home state, way up north and way down south, and across other affiliates that joined the week before, for their benefit, I can tell them go to hillsdale.edu. But can you just succinctly state for them what the mission of your college has been and remains since you took over as president in 2000 and long ago when it was founded?
1844, people who were in the cause of Abraham Lincoln, abolitionists, Christians, had a big part in the Civil War. And they founded the college for freedom, faith, learning, and character in a very beautiful document that we read at the beginning of every board meeting at Hillsdale College. It's a lovely thing, and the college is fun, difficult. If you decide to come there, it'll be hell, and you'll learn a lot. And so it's a very old-fashioned place rooted in the revolution of the Lincoln politics of the Civil War.
Now, I tell people the three-legged stool of the Constitution is conservatives within the Republican Party, conservatives in broadcast media, and conservatives in academia, and they rank differently. I think at the top of the leg of the stool in academia is Hillsdale College. I call it the lantern in the north. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. I want them to know it's hard to get into Hillsdale, so they should start early, but they can sign up for Imprimis, which is a monthly speech digest. But Dr. Arnn, what about Hillsdale schools? Because I'm about to advise a group in Maine to call you up about starting one in Maine where Catholic schools are closing. So what about the Hillsdale schools?
Well, we're teachers for a living, so we're like hammers. Everything looks like a nail to us. Huh. And so we got into K through 12 education about 14 years ago. And we have now sponsoring about 100 schools and adding 7 or 8 a year. There's a curriculum. There's detailed assistance in instruction and organization of a school and the order in which you go through things to become an educated person by the time you're 18 years old. And so those schools are thriving, and there are hundreds of other schools that use the curriculum that are not so closely affiliated with us. And so it's a big movement, and it's growing very fast, and it offers a vast hope for the future of the Republic, I think.
Okay, last question before we get to the events of the new year. People know me. I've told them about me. They know my regular guests, like Senator Cotton was on earlier this week. They may not know you. You are a Ph.D. in political theory, trained by Harry Jaffa at Claremont, and you are at least the equal of any Churchill scholar in the United States, having been part of the official biography team of Winston Churchill. But how else would you describe yourself other than married to the wonderful Penny and father and grandfather?
We keep boxer dogs, and I have visited Petoskey, Michigan, and Charlevoix, Michigan, and Pensacola, Florida many times, and find them beautiful places. And Petoskey and Charlevoix are summer resorts. They get cold in the winter, so you should go up there.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that, so I'm glad I asked. All right, so all things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu, all of the prior Hillsdale dialogues, years of them, collected at hughforhillsdale.com. Let's get started on the Constitution. And first, your general reaction to what President Trump ordered done over the weekend in Venezuela.
Amazement, shock, and awe. I thought something was going to happen, but to go down there and get him and bring him here, that's kind of cool. I mean, how do you do that? And it was, a massive effort, and it was coordinated, and it came off. And that means that it was also very risky because, what if he wasn't in the right place? What if 1,000 things that might have gone wrong? And one of the thing shows is President Trump has nerve. He's a very nervy guy. And he just follows, apparently this has been planned for months, many different plans. It was delayed several times because of weather. And so they're in the middle of everything else he's doing. He's in close counsel about whether to go ahead with this thing or not. And darned if he didn't do it. And it changes the world. There's this morning's news, there's a Russian tanker being escorted by a Russian submarine, and we're after it. And apparently we're not going to let the submarine stop us. And what does that mean? That means that China and there's a Chinese diplomatic delegation, high level, arriving in Venezuela a couple of days before this happened. And so the Chinese and the Russians are all over this place, and they, are despots. Maduro is a despot. He rigged the last election, apparently, and he's in league with despots. And it matters strategically to the United States because if you just put together with Taiwan what's going on there and China's interest, if you look at a map, China is blocked in its open access to the Pacific Ocean by a bunch of islands, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Philippines, a bunch of them. And they're interested in getting out. Well, we have that close access. That's, but there's a choke points around Cuba, which is why the Soviet Union and now China are interested in Cuba and subsidize it. And then Venezuela, which is farther away, is a way for them to have access to the Pacific near us. And of course, they've got big interest in Panama, too. So the point is, what this is about, it is about the Monroe Doctrine, which James Monroe, what was he, 5th president of the United States, 6th?
5.
And one of the founders.
Yeah, 5.
He made a deal, interestingly enough, he made a deal partly with the British that the European nations would not be allowed to muck around in North America, that it was going to be free land. And we were not going to turn North and South America into Europe with lots of warring powers, at odds with each other all the time. And so he wanted to protect this Western Hemisphere. And so that's what's going on here, I think. Of course, the next subject is Green.
Your friend and student, my friend and regular guest, Senator Tom Cotton, was on the program this week. He is chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee and therefore one of the group of 8, which routinely receives notice of when the United States is about to pull something off. They were not notified in advance. Senator Cotton said on this program, I think on Tuesday, maybe Monday, he's fine with that. He got a call. He got an elbow in the rib from his wonderful wife at 3:30 in the morning, who's a lighter sleeper than he is. And Mr. Cotton said to Mr. Cotton, why is Marco Rubio calling you at 3:30 in the morning? And Senator Cotton said, I don't know, but it's going to be exciting. And he said he was fine with both the president's use of his authority and the notice he received and the notice that Congress received. That's a constitutional issue. What's your opinion of that?
Well, by my count, and John Yoo, constitutional scholar and former clerk of Clarence Thomas, account, we've attacked militarily other nations 125 times. And that's from the founding to the current day. And we have declared war 5 times, actually 11 times if you count as discrete the several countries that we declared war against in World War I and World War II. And the Constitution says the Congress has that power to declare war. And it's pretty clear about that. And in the Federalist, Hamilton is pretty clear. Part of the purpose of the Federalist, by the way, is to get people in New York especially to vote for the Constitution. And they're allaying fears that the president will be a king, which was a fear at the time. We have the No Kings movement here today in America. And so he takes that view. I guess we're going to take a break, and I want to finish the point because it's very important how it's worked out and why it has to work out.
All right, we'll come right back after the break and pick up with that with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Go sign up for Imprimis during the break. I'll be right back. It's free. I'll be right back with Dr. Arnn. Stay tuned.
Hillsdale College is a small, Christian, classical liberal arts college that operates independently of government funding, and we want you or your son or daughter to apply. At Hillsdale, students grow in heart and mind by studying timeless truths in a supportive community dedicated to the highest things. Hillsdale College costs significantly less than other nationally ranked private liberal arts colleges and receives regular recognition as a best value, and nearly all students receive financial aid. Our robust core curriculum, vibrant student life, and 8-to-1 student-to-faculty ratio make for an education like no other. For more information or to fill out an application, visit hillsdale.edu/info. That's hillsdale.edu/info.
I am back with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, in the first Hillsdale Dialogue of the year. And Dr. Arnn was explaining that, according to Professor Hugh and his count, the United States has taken military action 125 times, but only has, what did you say, 5 declarations of war, even though the declaration of war power is committed to the legislature in Article 1, but the president in Article 2, head of the executive branch in paragraph 2, section 2 of Article 2, he's commander of the Army, commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy. So you were about to say.
So it looks like it's a strict thing. By one reading, it is a strict thing. And the reading implied by Hamilton, a very great authority in the Federalist, that you can't fight anybody if you don't declare war, and Congress has to do that. But it's never worked out that way. And the reason that's okay is 2 reasons, in my opinion. The first is it's necessary because, you know, what are you going to go get Congress to declare war on Venezuela? And then they're going to know we're coming, and that's not going to work. But the second reason is something that Madison points to in the 51st Federalist, one of the first important, and that is the structure of the Constitution is the most important thing about it, that it is divided in the way that it is, and that there are various means of influence or control of one branch on the other, not just the Congress over the president, but in some cases the president over the Congress. In other words, the powers are separated and the tools are there to keep them separate. And then what are the essential powers of the Congress? They can cause the president enormous trouble in the short term if they want to. They did, for example, against both Nixon and Reagan when they were engaged in fighting in other places, and Congress didn't like it. And, the key power is the money power. They can just not give them any money for the war. That was connected to the Iran-Contra controversy in the 80s, where Iran gave us some money and we used it to fight the Contras, and Reagan apparently didn't know about it, but it was a mess, right?
There was an attempt to get around a refusal to fund American operations on behalf of the Contras, which the United States House of Representatives passed in the form of the Boland Amendment, so we couldn't spend any money directly on the Contras. So Oliver North and John Poindexter cooked up, we will sell arms to Iran, get that money, and send that money to the Contras. And that didn't work out well, but it was an attempt to get around an appropriation rider.
Yeah, and the Contras were in Nicaragua, right?
Yes.
And so the truth is, the president has a very wide power to launch an attack on somebody who's a danger to us or to respond to an attack. But the Congress has 100 ways of going about causing him trouble about that. And so, like I said earlier, Trump has nerve, right? Well, what happens if they go down there and miss? you don't have to search very hard in history to see what happens. Jimmy Carter launched an effort to get the hostages back from Iran, which they held for, 2 years or something. And the effort failed in the desert when the helicopters didn't work. And that was a black mark on him and caused his, eventually contributed to his defeat by Ronald Reagan in the 1980 election. So the truth is, this ability to launch military forces as commander-in-chief is not an unlimited power, and it shouldn't be, and it isn't. But on the other hand, if everybody from Thomas Jefferson, from John Adams through Thomas Jefferson through now Donald Trump, but also Barack Obama, Joe Biden, presidents do this, right? And they fight people and they attack people without a declaration of war against them. And they always have. And I think it's necessary that they be able to do so.
At this point, I want to just lay out some of the big ones for the audience that have occurred over the last 50 years, beginning with President Ford seized the Mayaguez on May 12th through 15th in Cambodia after we were out of Vietnam, had no congressional authorization. You mentioned Operation Eagle Claw on April 24th of 1980. That was President Carter. And Desert One that failed. President Reagan invaded Grenada on October 25th, 1983. George H.W. Bush invaded Panama, December 1989. President Clinton bombed Serbia for 78 days, along with NATO, in March and June of 1999. President Obama bombed Libya, famous leading from behind, in 2011. He also launched Operation Neptune Spear into Pakistan from Afghanistan to kill bin Laden later that year. President Trump ordered Soleimani killed and al-Baghdadi killed. And, of course, President Obama, during his 8 years, had between 540 and 560 drone strikes, some on American citizens. Joe Biden ordered drone strikes in Syria in February 25 of 2021. That's only a dozen or so of the 125 incidents you mentioned. There is simply no argument here, is there?
No. My favorite is the Barbary Pirates.
Of course it is.
I've always loved that. Thomas Jefferson sent the Navy and some soldiers to rout the Barbary Pirates. And he told the Congress that it was a defensive measure alone, but his direct orders to the soldiers and sailors he sent was, go get them, take the offensive. And see, remember, the president is accountable for that. It's the nature of executive action that it has to be sudden and prudential in its nature, and it depends, the rightness or wrongness of it depends decisively, not wholly, but decisively, on the circumstances in which it's done and how well it's done. And the president is accountable for that in the short term. Like if this turns into a mess, the midterms are coming, right? And odds are, if the history holds, the Dems are going to take the House and maybe the Senate. We'll see. Trump does astonishing things and maybe he'll hold them. Who knows? But the truth is they're coming. And there's going to be an election about them. And this is going to be a factor in that election. And so it's not an unchecked power, and it wouldn't be right if it were.
And I'll be right back with Dr. Arnn. We'll talk more about not the Barbary Pirates, but Thomas Jefferson. There's a lot. I've got something from the State Department archives on Thomas Jefferson and the Louisiana Purchase as well, so stay tuned. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt with Dr. Larry Arnn. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway. All Hillsdale Dialogues, dating back, a decade, are collected at hughforhillsdale.com. Next week, we will have part 16 in our series on Churchill's World War II memoirs. But today, we're looking at what happened over the weekend and what might happen in Iran and what might happen in Nigeria, the exercise of presidential power. Dr. Larry Arnn is my guest. Dr. Arnn, I got to the Department of State's official history of the United States and went back to Jefferson getting a hold of Louisiana. Its official history says Napoleon threatened to reconquer the Sugar Islands and then to militarize New Orleans. And so Jefferson made preparations for war, but he also sent James Monroe, as Secretary of State and future president, and Robert Livingston to France to try and purchase New Orleans and West Florida for as much as $10 million. To their surprise, Napoleon offered to sell it for $15 million, which exceeded their instructions, and they said yes. And President Jefferson agreed, even though he didn't believe he had the authority to do it and that the Constitution would have to be amended to do it, but he did it anyway. And no one's ever complained about that because although Jefferson was the original anti-federalist, I mean, he was really against the Constitution's broader interpretation. Necessity is its own interpretation sometimes. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, or you can put the point another way. Thomas Jefferson, who was a very great man, and without him, no America, he was also a foolish man in some ways. He liked strict rules, and he didn't like them to last very long. He wrote this letter to Madison while Madison was busy writing the Constitution of the United States in the convention, and says the earth belongs to the living, and so you should put in the contract that in the Constitution of the United States that every contract, including the Constitution, should expire every generation because it's wrong for the current generation to prejudice the next. Well, that's a partner with the opposite strain in Jefferson, and that was that rules should be very strict. Well, Madison, who often corrected Jefferson, wrote him back and said, it actually is the purpose of the Constitution to prejudice the generations down through time. And so Jefferson's life involved several attempts to reconcile those two positions. And he did it the way those things have to be done. He did it prudentially. That is to say, yeah, I don't think I have the power to do that. Let's buy that thing.
Let's take it.
And so he did.
Now, I think that's going to happen with Greenland as well. And the left is coming undone. And they're undone with Venezuela, and they are undone with the strike in Nigeria, and they may be undone with whatever Donald Trump does in Iran. My question is, what is the Trump effect on the left? How do you explain it to people? If you have to talk to someone who just beamed aboard the United States, Donald Trump acts upon the left wing in the United States because what?
Well, we're in a quarrel. It's fundamental about the ultimate purposes and manner of governance of our country. There's nothing in politics more general than what we're fighting about today. And Donald Trump is a fighter, big time. And, he's got those personal characteristics that offend the heck out of people. He is the most adept at the use of the superlative degree of any president I've ever heard of. And, everything, there's only great and greatest, I guess. So that's the superlative and the super superlative. And, he talks about himself a fair amount. And then he does things. And, my own view is that there's a larger consistency in Donald Trump. He wants to drain the swamp. And so it's the swamp that complains the most. And what is the swamp? It represents that new, different kind of government that's been grafted on to the constitutional form we had. The constitutional form being limited, most of its powers and activities local rather than national. And what we've done is concentrated vast wealth, under the direct and indirect control of the federal government. And so Donald Trump is reducing that in some important ways. And in other ways not, one must admit. The biggest part of the federal government is the entitlement programs, and that's, we have to do something about those. And I can tell you if you want what I think Trump is trying to do about it. But he's no enemy of those, and I don't think it would be politically possible for anybody to sustain being an enemy of those. That's what makes him mad.
That it makes everybody mad. And I'll be back with Dr. Arnn to continue talking about not only Donald Trump, but another New Yorker, Mayor Mamdani, when I return to the Hugh Hewitt Show and the Hillsdale Dialogue. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu.
Hello, this is Jeremiah Regan, and I have some great news. We've brought Hillsdale's incredibly popular free online courses to the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. The Hillsdale College Online Courses Podcast brings you our online courses in their entirety, with courses ranging from ancient history and biblical epics to foundational political principles and the future of American citizenship. Follow the Hillsdale College Online Courses podcast to hear new episodes every week with additional commentary and insights from our team. Go to podcast.hillsdale.edu to learn more. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu.
Welcome back, America. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway. First one of the year. Dr. Larry Arnn is up on campus at Hillsdale in Hillsdale, Michigan. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu, and all of our prior dialogues, years of them, and 15 prior ones on the current book that we are in, The Gathering Storm, to which we will return next week with part 16. They are all collected at hughforhillsdale.com or wherever podcasts are. The Hillsdale Dialogue, you have to listen to those. Dr. Arnn, Mr. Zohran Mamdani, we were talking about the meaning of President Trump, why he makes people mad. I am watching from afar. He cannot hurt me because I am not in the city. I only go there to visit. I suppose I might pay more in hotel tax or something like that. I don't live in New York, so he can't wreck my state economy. I'm a Virginian. What do you make of the meaning of Mamdani and the fact that the youngsters in New York elected him?
First of all, New York is important. It's also a wonderful place to visit. I've never lived there. It's challenging. It's hard to get around. It's super crowded. It's a teeming, vibrant, massive world city, and it's always been important in American politics. I remember in the 2016 debates, Ted Cruz, a very good guy, attacked Donald Trump as a New Yorker, and in the debate, Trump warmed to the theme, talked about the greatness of New York, and convincingly. And so I think it's sad for all of us that it's turned this way. I think it'll have a bad effect on the country. And I think what you say about these young people, I think there's a problem there. I think we've done a very poor job offering them an education. You can't give anybody an education, but you can lay out what a good one is. And if you do that, most of them will take to it. And we don't do that anymore. And also there's some hopelessness. These people, these young people, much of their growing up was marred by the COVID years, couldn't go to school, constrained in 100 ways, ask at a young age that is an appreciable percentage of their total lifetime to take time off and sit around. And that's not a good way to grow up. And so there's a tendency one sees for young women to turn to Karl Marx and young men to turn to Friedrich Nietzsche. And those are two different kinds of poison that are closely related. And so that's a serious thing and a disturbing thing. And it needs to be combated. We need to offer them a better education. As they grow older, they will learn that, those things don't work out. I mean, socialism has not been tried anywhere where it's worked.
Well, that's what I wonder about Mayor Mamdani, Dr. Arnn. I think he is sincerely committed to when he talks about the warm embrace of collectivism and the coldness of rugged individualism. I think he's sincere. I don't think he's stupid because he went to Bowdoin and studied unusual things, but Bowdoin's a good liberal arts school. And then he ran for and got elected 3 times to the New York State Assembly. He's never had a job other than that. So that makes him ignorant because if you're not lying and deceitful and you're sincere and you're not stupid, and I don't think he's stupid, and yet you believe this nonsense, then you are ignorant of history for the reason you just said. It never works. And the idea of collectivizing housing or that there ought not to be private property ownership and that the buses ought to be free, that's nuts.
Yeah, it's the trouble is there's a promise that socialism gives that everything will be taken care of. Marx's picture of it is, his picture is rugged. It requires a period of dictatorship and effectively civil war to get to socialism. But when we get there, everything will be taken care of for everybody, and then they won't have to fight about anything. They can have a leap into freedom. Well, the reason that doesn't work is that human life is not like that. And, we are here, we have to eat and we have to move, and we have a rational understanding that we understand about our own mortality, the only animals that do. And so we face all those questions, each one of us. And then a radical thing about us is we are also made to face it together because we have the gift of speech. We can talk about these things together. That draws us closer than other animals. But to attempt to erase the conditions of human life in necessity, in the fact that each of us must perform in order to build our own happiness, that's just despotism. And it will lead to what C.S. Lewis called the abolition of man, finally. If it's true that there needs, I'm very partial to Elon Musk, and I drive a Cybertruck, and it drives itself, and I just think the guy's a world historical force. But lately he's talking about sustained abundance for all. Work will be optional. Well, that doesn't make any sense because that's not human, right? We have to struggle. We do. And, you've been doing this radio show for a long time, and it's a lot of work. And you have to do the work for the show to be any good. And, I've learned some things in my life. It took time. And often I was tired when I had to do it. I think of Charlie Kirk, my friend, who was assassinated, and he was the antidote, the single best antidote in recent times to this radicalism that's growing among the young. And Lord, that boy was a worker. And he got a splendid education on his own with the help of Hillsdale College online courses and certain people there, including myself. But I told him early on, I said, you should probably try to learn because you're using a bunch of words and you don't know what they mean. And you're 19 years old and you're starting this big deal. He said, how do I do that? And I said, well, you have to suffer. And, because if it was easy, everybody would be wise. And everybody wants to be wise, but you got to work for it. And then you deserve it if you do. So that's the thing. If you attempt and see, because you can't, somebody builds a house or buys an apartment building in New York City. And they had to work to do that, and they took risks to do that, and they have to live every day. And then the government takes it. That's force.
That's force, right? And that is socialism.
That much force in government, and that's dangerous.
And then people won't build any more apartments because they won't get fooled again. I'll be back for one more segment with Dr. Arnn. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Or, of course, all the Hillsdale Dialogues are collected at hugh4hillsdale.com. One more segment coming up. Don't go anywhere, America. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. It's our first Hillsdale Dialogue of the year. They are all collected at hugh4hillsdale.com. Dr. Arnn, you mentioned earlier that we are in an election year. Midterms are coming up in 2026. The third quarter of 2025 had 4.3% GDP. Inflation is way down from the Biden inflation peak of 9%. It's below 3%. And Donald Trump's tariffs, if they're going to crush the economy, they're not doing a very good job of it. And some of them have been replaced. Some of them annoy me. Some of them I think are necessary. Generally speaking, though, the political tides favor the out party in an off year, meaning Democrats would take the House. I know you're not a prophet or a son of a prophet, but what do you think these elections will turn on? I don't think they'll turn on Venezuela or Iran. What do you think they'll turn on? No, it's the economy, stupid. People, it's the good sense of the American people. Since long about 1960, as the government began to be centralized, it lost the trust of the people, and it deserves to lose it. Wastes a lot of money, lives for itself too much. The accountable parts of the government, the parts that are elected, are relatively weaker compared to the permanent parts. Now, Trump has been addressing that more effectively than anyone has since it began to be a problem in America. So people are disaffected with the government, and that means that what they used to not do this. For most of American history, there used to be party in power for a generation at a time, and they would tend to control both the executive and the legislative branches. But since 1960, it's much more common for the powers to be divided. The Republicans control both houses narrowly now, and the executive branch, but midterms tend to run against that.
And so that means I think that might be the explanation for that phenomenon, which is not characteristic of most of American history. So, in 1800, when Thomas Jefferson's party basically destroyed the Federalist Party that had founded the country, he controlled the Congress and went on to do it for a long time. And then the Republicans did it for a long time after the amazing career and the Civil War of Abraham Lincoln. So this new thing is people have a lot of complaints, and they're right to have them. Sometimes they have some ones that are not right to have, and sometimes wrong that are right to have, but they certainly have ground for a lot of complaints. The government is expensive, it's inefficient, it's intrusive, and it gives away a lot of stuff, not all fairly. Look at the Somali thing in Minnesota, it's been viral right now. So, yeah, and who knows what's going to happen, but
it'll be interesting, and we will cover it, not most weeks, but occasionally we cover current events on the Hillsdale Dialogue like today. We'll be back next week talking Winston Churchill and the opening moves before the opening battle of World War II. So don't miss next week's Hillsdale Dialogue. Thank you, Dr. Larry Arnn.
Thanks for listening to the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. For more information about Hillsdale College, head to hillsdale.edu.